Hello, my name is Lee Presser. This is my show. I speak frequently to very interesting people. Some of these conversations are so exciting, so intellectually stimulating, I thought others might like to listen in. This is the reason we started recording Conversation with Lee Presser.
Welcome to Conversation with Lee Presser. Missouri lost a U.S. House seat as a result of the recent census. The Missouri 2nd District has been redrawn and enlarged. The current congressman from that district, Todd Akin, is not running for re-election. Ann Wagner has stepped forward and is asking for that job. Mrs. Wagner is a very experienced Republican politician. Beginning in 1999, she chaired the Missouri Republican Party for 3 terms. In 2001, she became the co-chair of the Republican National Committee. She was appointed by President Bush as ambassador to the European country of Luxembourg and served there from August of 2005 to July of 2009. In 2010, Mrs. Wagner serves as the chair for Roy Blunt's successful U.S. Senate campaign. January of this year, she was an unsuccessful candidate for the chairmanship of the Republican National Committee. We are very pleased to have her with us today to speak about her candidacy for the U.S. House of Representatives. Ann Wagner, welcome to Conversation.
Thank you, Lee.
Quite a resume.
Well, you know, and it goes back even further than that.
Well, we only had so many seconds to talk about your accomplishments, so moving into a House seat would not be a big leap for you.
Well, I'm excited about it. Excited about the opportunity. We have this marvelous new district here in the 2nd District of St. Louis metropolitan area, and I am running for Congress, and I'm running to bring strong and effective conservative leadership to both Washington, D.C. and to the 2nd District. You know, Lee, this is the first time that I have ever run for office on a federal or statewide level. I believe in citizen legislators, and I believe that are many Missourians, and certainly in the 2nd District, that feel like I do. They're fed up. They're fed up with their government. They're fed up with politics as usual. They're ready to have a fighter and someone who's going to say no to this out-of-control spending and borrowing spree that we've been on now for far, far too long. I am a fighter. I've been a fighter in politics, in public service, and in the private sector work that I've done also. And I want to fight. I want to fight for Missouri's families. I want to fight for their traditional family values. I want to fight for our job creators that are truly suffering right now under this administration, and for our American way of life. You know, my background in the 2nd District is really rooted in St. Louis County in the metropolitan area. It's my hometown where I was born and raised, where I've raised my family, where I've worked in the community. My husband and I, it's where we go to church, where our family lives. We've worked in the private sector. I am both the granddaughter and daughter of small business entrepreneurs in the 2nd District. And
that's an interesting story that you were telling
roots.
about I heard you tell this story about working in your parents' store. Why don't you just briefly tell people a little bit about this, that you actually do have experience working.
I do. Great private sector work in businesses that really create jobs. My parents, we've lived all over the district, from South County to Webster Groves to now out in the Baldwin area, in the heart of the 2nd District. And my parents brought us out west when I was 12 years old and in grade school to have their American dream, which was to start a small retail carpet business. And I watched my parents toil to do this and work morning, noon, and night while juggling the needs of a family. We all worked. It was a family business. And I, at 12 years old, I cleaned the restrooms, I vacuumed, I tagged sale items, and worked my way up to the showroom floor. Interestingly enough, on a side note, there was a young man who was working there at the age of 16 who was cutting carpets and hauling them for my father and his business. And many years later, he became my husband, who is now my husband, Ray Wagner, of 25 years. But everything started there. And I remember my father struggling and fighting against government regulation, whether it was the sign out front, the displays in the showroom floors, whether it was high taxes, red tape, and government regulation. At the time, soaring interest rates of 22%, gas lines, you name it. And what I learned at a very early age, both in my grandfather's shop, which was up in Pagedale, in a different business, and my father's carpet shop, was that government ought not to be on the backs of hardworking people trying to earn a living. I watched my parents, and I learned about a strong work ethic and how to treat people and how to act with integrity and honesty. And at the end of the day, those same tenets about getting on the backs of job creators were true then, and they're true now. And we're seeing at the moment a federal government, in terms of over-regulation, that is truly run amok. Whether it's if they can't get it through legislatively, Lee, they are backdooring it through all of these government agencies, EPA, Energy, Labor, Interior. I checked the Federal Registry before I came, and there are some 4,200 new rules and regulations that are still in the pipelines due to this new administration, and more on the way. 379 in the month of July alone. Job creators are screaming about this.
What can a congressperson do? I mean, seriously, we have 3 branches. The number 1 branch is supposed to be the legislative branch. They're supposed to be allocating the money and directing the administrative branch as to what to do. But it seems to me the administrative branch has suddenly, as you've just said, taken off on its own and but the Congress has given them huge blocks of money to do this with. They couldn't do it if Congress hadn't appropriated this money. So what is it as a congressperson that you can do in order to help people, successors to your father, in businesses in and around where your father's business was?
Well, absolutely. Number 1, we've got to stop this out-of-control borrowing and break up the credit card of the United States government. It's as simple as that. If my daughter overspends the limit on the card, guess what? It gets broken in half until she's paid off that debt and has herself right again. We need to run the government like we run our businesses, like we run our states with a balanced budget amendment, like we run our families with responsibility and caring and not spending beyond our means. So it is time for strong people to go to Washington, D.C., who are effective enough and principled enough to say no to the out-of-control borrowing that's out there. 40 cents of every dollar right now that's spent by the federal government is in fact borrowed, and that's wrong. We've got to cut the spending and rein it back in. I was a big proponent of cut, cap, and balance when we were looking at this last debate some weeks ago, and felt that it was time that we not just stop the borrowing, but we stop the spending and really do that in a very large way and attack some of the new things that we need to talk about too, like entitlement spending and such.
Well, I'm glad that you brought that part up, because when I looked at at that bill, the one that I guess it became law, and something like $1 trillion is already in there, plus they have to create a committee in order to find another $1.8 trillion. But when you look at that over a 10-year period, you're only talking about cutting about $280 billion a year. As I see it, and it's not just me, I mean, as the numbers show, we're spending about $100 to $150 billion a month, that's a month, not a year, more than we're taking in. So this $280 billion that Congress found to cut back seems like a drop in the bucket to me. What is it that we can do in Congress in order to lower the somewhere between $1,200 and $1,800 billion every year that we're overspending?
It is a drop in the bucket. And you know what? This president has grown our debt in an overachiever way that is beyond belief and extremely reckless, which is why we're having such difficulties with consumer spending, which is why we're seeing still record unemployment out there, why we're seeing our debt downgraded. And I think that there's more to come, why we see fluctuations in the market that are up and down. You know, when you're running deficits, as this president has for the last 3 cycles now, that are somewhere between 1.2 and $1.6 trillion, and that's each year. Mm-hmm. It's no wonder that we are now at a $17 trillion debt. But this debt ceiling program scheme that was passed is I think outrageous, because you're quite right. It really it doesn't even begin to address the problem. And frankly, a lot of the cutting that were in that first $1 trillion tranche doesn't even kick in until 2017. Then they set up a super committee that I don't understand, this committee of 12. You know, I thought we had a super committee that we as the American people sent to Washington to get things done, and it's exactly that, Lee. It's called Congress. Right. And what they're being asked to do, I think, is nearly impossible. And what's most scary is if they don't get the job done, we're subject to huge cuts, almost $500 billion in defense spending, which I think is truly reckless in this dangerous world in which we live. And we've seen the defense budget minimized over a period of many years now. It opens us up to tax increases, which absolutely the American people will not stand, and I will not stand for. No tax increases, none at all, ever while I'm in Congress. And certainly, this group of 12 have that opportunity to present that. It's also a plan that put no teeth in the balanced budget amendment. It doesn't allow it to go to the states for a vote. The majority of our states have a balanced budget amendment, and they have to live within their means. And it's important to do that. And this is a toothless exercise that's going on. I think Congress needs to get back there right now and get back to work about the people's business.
Mm-hmm. Now, again, coming back to $100 billion a month that we're overspending beyond what we're taking in, what is it that we can, let's face it, these are entitlements we're talking about. We're not talking about running the post office. We're not talking about all of the nice to haves. The overspending is in areas that people hold near and dear. And all too often, I've talked to politicians most of my life, and it's like, it's easy to say, oh, would you like me to give you? But it's a whole lot easier to say, we gave that to you, but we just can't afford it anymore. We have to take it back. How do you handle a situation like that? And I know you deal with a lot of people, and you deal with seniors on a regular basis who are the primary beneficiaries of many of Medicare and Social Security are the two main items I'm referring to.
And they make up, along with a couple of the other entitlements, about 43% of our budget right now, which is just grown out of control. And with an aging society, and the baby boomers becoming of age, it's a difficult. That's us. It's a difficult. It's a difficult situation, but it's time we have an adult conversation about this, Lee. And I believe that Paul Ryan and that the Republicans in Congress have begun to have that conversation. Now, a few things. We have to keep our promises to our seniors. We truly do. And there are ways of doing this and reforming Medicare and the entitlement programs where we can keep our promises to our seniors. And most importantly, this is about saving it for the future. And I believe this is how we have to better frame the dialogue on this. If we don't do something now, we are not going to have Medicare and some of these safety nets for the future. But it is absolutely bleeding us right now as a country. I think we have a Democrats in Congress and a president who want to demagogue the situation, that want to inject class warfare, that want to point fingers at Republicans, when frankly, the truth of the matter is, Lee, the only party and the only president who has truly cut Medicare in a huge way was President Barack Obama with his Obamacare, and cutting $500 billion from Medicare. And I'll tell you, one of the first things that I'm going to do in support when I'm in Congress, hopefully, will be to fully repeal Obamacare. I do not believe in these stimulus programs. I do not believe in these bailouts. I believe that this health insurance scheme is not only going to bankrupt us, but it is not going to give us better and more affordable care, and is adding trillions of dollars to the debt. So there are lots of ways that I think we can cut back and live within our means. But what it's going to take is strong, effective leaders who are proven, who are winners, who are people that are fighters, that are willing to go with a certain level of efficiency, of consistency, and stature to get things done. So that's a part of the narrative of why I'm most interested in going and serving the people of the 2nd District.
I noticed that Congressman from Wisconsin, Paul Ryan, who you named earlier, earlier this year put a stake in the ground and said we need to cut, I think it was $4 trillion out of the budget almost immediately. And he was called all kinds of names and was made to feel like, well, maybe I made a mistake, because I noticed he sort of backed away a little bit. because of the reaction. And yet now I even hear Senator Harry Reid, the majority leader of the Senate, talking about how, well, you know, we could have gotten to that $4 trillion if. So suddenly, by putting a stake in the ground, he has created a place which, while it seemed way out there only a few months ago, now seems a very centrist position.
Well, and what is interesting is, and it's not all doom and gloom, I will say that our new Republican majority in the House, and remember, we only have a third. We've got the House. The Senate is still in Democrat hands, but we're going to change that, and we're certainly going to change it here in Missouri when we retire Claire McCaskill. And we obviously have to have a new president at the top to get something done. But at least the Republican Party and some of our key leaders in Congress are leading. We have a president that hasn't put forth a budget or a plan his entire time in office. He doesn't have a jobs plan. He doesn't have a budget. He wants to demagogue issues and create class warfare, but he has no solution. The void of leadership is absolutely stunning to me, and it's serious, and it's frightening the American people. The only thing that he seems to be able to promote to somehow move us out of this debt and spending crisis is to either raise your taxes at a time when, you know, well, it's never the right time, but certainly now what that will do to job creators is devastating. He wants to raise your taxes, or he wants to spend more money through stimulus programs. He's talking about that now, and you watch when he ever gets back from his trip out east at Nantucket. I think you're going to hear him talk about those programs also, and they're wrong, and they create the kind of uncertainty that our job creators just can't live with. What I hear from people, you know, and remember, the government doesn't make jobs. We don't create jobs. Entrepreneurs do. Small and medium-sized business people do. People like my father and my grandfather, they create jobs. But what they need is a certain level of certainty. And what they've told me is, Ann, you know, I don't know what's going to happen to my energy costs. I don't know what's going to happen to my health care costs. I don't know what's going to happen to my taxes. And the overregulation that is bearing down on me, and the cost of that regulation. You know, it costs a small business owner with a small or medium-sized business 36% more per employee to comply with those rules and regulations coming out of Washington, D.C. than it does a larger, more efficient corporation. I mean, it is killing what is the economic engine of our nation. And really, to solve our revenue problem, Lee, we have to grow our economy and grow our revenue. And we do that when we put people back to work, you know, and grow our business culture and our capital society out here.
It's possible that you may face, or whoever the nominee is, may face Russ Carnahan, who is a sitting congressman for the district that disappeared, the third district. And Russ Carnahan would say different things than what you're saying right now, as you know. And among the things that he would say would be, well, we need to spend tax money in order to create jobs. I want you to explain to the audience, to the best of your understanding, of why you think that that is not a proper thing for the government to do to solve the problem.
Well, I mean, government doesn't create jobs, as I said before.
Well, it does if you give money and you say, okay, well, we need somebody to go around and hand out more tickets, meter maids, or you need somebody to work as a teacher in a school if you hand this money out.
But they don't have a multiplier effect. They're not actually growing business. They're not actually growing revenue or capital. Frankly, one of the saddest things is the only segment in our society that seems to be in the black and doing well these days are federal employees. There's no jobs crisis in Washington, D.C., and that is a pathetic statement out there. And I do believe that we're going to have to really face this as a nation, and that part of the cutting back on our spending is going to be going at the heart of some of these jobs. These are not things that actually grow business, that grow an economy, that grow the wealth and sustenance and revenue of a community. Mm-hmm. These are stopgap measures, and they're not necessarily permanent, and they're certainly not the kind of private sector jobs that we need to really put people back to work. So
why do you think that in area, and in the new 2nd District, there are some very, very Democrat areas. And so you're going to have, if you're the nominee, or even as a running for the nomination, you have to go and explain to these people why it is that you believe the things that you do, and to win them over to this argument.
Well, and you have to tell them this, that government, the free market principles that founded this great country are the ones that are best. I believe in capitalism. I believe in letting the free market flourish. I believe that government shouldn't be picking winners and losers, that they should get out of the way and off the backs of hardworking people trying to make a living. That is how you grow business. That is how you grow an economy. And I believe that the statistics are there. Certainly what they're doing now isn't working. And it's time for strong people to stand up and say, look, if we want people to invest in America, if we want more manufacturing jobs, if we want growth in business, let's do something about the corporate tax rate that is the highest in the nation. Let's do something about the repatriation dollars. Do you know U.S. companies abroad can't bring that money back home to the United States of America because they're taxed at nearly 39%. That's outrageous. It's the only place in the world that this happens. So our tax system needs to be reformed in a very large way. Anything that is 70,000 pages long, Lee, and you have to hire 2 accountants and a couple lawyers to get through to do your taxes, whether you're a small business or an individual, is wrong. And there are a lot of options out there, whether it's the fair tax, the flat tax, whether it's just lowering marginal rates, doing away with the death tax, doing away with taxes on capital gains and dividends. There are all sorts of things that we can do and do them permanently. Stop with the stopgap measures that Washington, D.C. and this administration are putting forward. If we don't interject some certainty to these job creators and to the American public, we're not going to get them spending again. We're not going to get them growing and investing in their business and in their employees. All of these things, I think, are things that members of Congress can affect. And I'm a doer. I've spent my life, the better part of my life, either working in the private sector, growing jobs and building capital, or I've been fighting for conservative values, conservative causes, and conservative Republicans to take office. And you don't work for them just to win. What you want to do is lead to positive conservative policies out there. Things like we've gotten with some of the Republicans that I've had the pleasure of supporting and electing. We've gotten tort reform, and we've seen job creation somewhere around 70,000 when Matt Blunt was in office. We balanced budgets. We saw workers' compensation reform. We saw good pro-life legislation. And let me just say, in terms of all 3 pillars of conservatism, where I stand on traditional family values, that marriage is between one man and one woman, that the sanctity of life from conception to natural death is the fiber of who we are, preserving people's Second Amendment's rights, fighting for local control in education and giving students in failing schools choice and vouchers and things of this nature. These are all things that I want to promote and, as I said, and fight for. And it's time for people who are winners, who are serious candidates, who are steady and effective, to go to Washington, D.C. and to dig in and say no to the out-of-control spending and yes to job creation and growing our economy.
We've got about 5 minutes left. Believe it or not, time goes by here like so quickly. I want to ask you about your campaign, okay? And two questions, but first I'll ask, what are you doing to reach out to the grassroots of the district that you live in and want to represent? Because some people say that you've already got the establishment pretty well wired because you're an establishment person. You've been around the party and they all know who you are. but there's a lot of folks who are in the grassroots that don't. So what are you doing in order to make them know you?
Well, I appreciate that question very, very much. And, I'm a grassroots girl. I was a Lafayette Township committee woman for 9 years. And it's a part of the resume that people don't talk about too terribly much, but I talk about, because to me it's the most important thing that I did, that neighbor-to-neighbor, door-to-door contact, the precinct work. And so I've worked in that arena for many years, and I'm very committed to that. And we have a very strong grassroots component of our campaign, both what I'll call some of the older grassroots and new grassroots, which includes some of our Tea Party and Patriot parties and the people that are now on fire to take back their country. I worked with many of them when I fought the establishment and ran against the Republican National Committee chairman. That was a shot across the establishment bow, and one that I was willing to stand up for conservative principles and for what was right.
Earlier
this year, you bet. And we have several different approaches on our campaign, and the one that I'm most proud of is our grassroots approach. We are in the middle of tabletop tours where we're going in and meeting people in the district and talking to them at their kitchen tables and their family rooms about the issues that are important to them and their families. We're going to events. We're talking in the community, within both the business community and in the grassroots community. But it's something I'm very comfortable with and will be a major cornerstone of this campaign. We have to send a strong, tried and true conservative who's effective and a leader to Washington, D.C. in this district. And I'm going to make sure I have the resources to get my message out and tell people who I am. And I'm going to stand on my conservative traditional principles, both from a national security, fiscal and economic side, and traditional values. And I'm going to reach out to every single person in this district. And the support that we've received thus far is wide and broad and different. From independents to, as I said, new and old grassroots, to people in the business community, people that have never been involved in politics before. We're going to reach out to any and everyone that we possibly can to be a part of this team effort.
I have one other important area that I want to ask you about, and this one's going to be a little more difficult. I read in Joe Manis's column that you have brought Jeff Rowe into your campaign, and John Hancock. But Jeff Rowe, I don't say this, but there are others who I've heard say this, is a dirty player. That he does opposition research, that he looks up all the dirt, and that he makes sure that it gets out on television and to the newspapers. Is this going to be a big part of your campaign?
Well, let me just say this, that the team that we announced was the top leader of my campaign, and the chairman of my campaign is Catherine Hanaway. Mm-hmm. And I am the person who has her name on the yard sign and is and on the ballot. So the decisions that will be made about the campaign will be made by myself and in conjunction with my campaign chairman and an entire team of people that want to be on board this campaign. And I'm proud of every single member that's on that team, those that are working in fundraising, those that are working in grassroots, those that are working as general consultants. And I think that I have nothing but the highest praise for Jeff Rowe. He's worked in 56 campaigns. I think the smear tactics that others are using against him are wrong and not deserving of a congressional race.
We need to go. Thank you very much for your time. I've really enjoyed the time that you've given us.
My pleasure.
Thank you so much. I've been speaking with Ann Wagner. She is a candidate for the United States House of Representatives in the 2nd District of Missouri. For folks who are normal viewers, see you next week. Thank you.